panel on artificial. Got it. Okay. For our panel on artificial intelligence, we have three speakers that I'm really excited about this evening who are going to be sharing some of their expertise with us about AI and some different perspectives on the technology and what it is and how it can be incorporated into our work lives and classrooms. So without further ado, we'll get started. Our first presenter is Tianus Oliphant, who is from Stephen F. Austin State University, and he works in our Center for Teaching and Learning here, and he is sort of our guru, go-to person for most things technology, and that has held true as the AI trend has come in, and he's really helped the faculty and staff here at SFA sort of move into that. So I'm going to turn it over to him to talk to us about ChatGPT and AI.
Well, hello. Thank you very much, Rachel, for that introduction. So hello, everyone. My name is Tianus Oliphant. I am the Technology Support Coordinator at Stephen F. Austin State University. I work with our LMS, Zoom, Qualtrics, Office 365, basically all the things that technology touches in some way. Emily was supposed to be with us tonight, but unfortunately she had something that she had to go take care of. So even though we've been doing like the majority of our presentations together, I just kind of wanted to give you an introduction to me. I have, for the last several years, been in some capacity related to or interested in AI. I started with automation several years ago by writing a program for basically handling some office tasks that we had to do by hand. And so that's completely automated now, except for a little bit of oversight for me. Ends up saving our department about 2 months a year on labor for basically our staff. I've also been interested in blockchain technology, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, basically anything that you can strap a computer to. I have explored in some way and really enjoyed. So our objectives for today, and I realize these are not very good objectives, but they basically get the idea of what we're here to do. I'm going to explain a little bit about how AI learns and kind of what it is. We're going to provide some examples on AI in our lives, because I think it's interesting to compare what we've seen on the news and in articles versus what we have. And then we're going to demonstrate how instructors and students can utilize AI as a tool. So what is our current version of AI? I'm going to start with a hint by saying that it's not any of these. So it's not something that you can form a relationship with, like her. Unfortunately, it is not as cool as C-3PO. It is not Megan from the horror movie Megan. It is not the T-800 from Terminator. And as cool as it would be, it is not Chappie from the movie Chappie. However, it does look a little more like this. So the TikTok algorithm, or basically any sort of social media, has an algorithm associated with it. And that means anything that you do related to yourself is put through this filter, and that's how you get the content for yourself. Our Google wonderful assistants, as well as web browsers, use a form of AI. Programs like Grammarly, which I'm a huge fan of. I've been subscribing to the premium model for 5 or 6 years. So as someone who is ESL, that is very helpful to me. Our assistants on our phones, I'm not going to mention them because that might activate several of them. Our assistants at home. And then, of course, you may have seen this really interesting picture of what I like to call the dope pope. And obviously, this is not an image that is real, but it is generated. But this is currently what we're dealing with. And at SFA, we have Jackbot, who is our basically an assistant. And what this assistant has done is made it to where a lot of the student-facing departments can use this chatbot, and it actually saves us a lot of time. This is an example of AI basically assuming what the rest of the Mona Lisa would look like. So this image was fed into an image generator, and then it was passed through, and this is basically the result. Now, we don't really know what the area looked like, but according to AI, it looks like this. Another new trend is we see people using headshot images in things like LinkedIn. And while it's a good idea to get a variety of headshots, it might be a little bit more unsettling if you zoom into the face and look at things like the teeth or the mouth. So it's just a great way of getting headshots without actually having to spend hours taking headshots. So a quick introduction to AI. AI basically mimics human intelligence. There is no amount of learning that AI can do that will basically replace the brain. So anything that it does has at some point been human generated content. AI is trained using machine learning, which is basically just statistics, and vast amounts of data to correlate facts with responses. Basically, an easy way to visualize this is that we have human generated content that's passed through the gigantic AI algorithm, and then out comes AI generated content. So this is, of course, a very simplified version of it, but this is basically what every AI tool does. So what's been happening over the last few months is that ChatGPT in particularly has been ingesting so much AI data that its accuracy has decreased by a significant margin. When asked to do specific tasks, ChatGPT struggles much more now than it did in earlier parts of 2023. So I'll get to that in just a minute. So what is ChatGPT? ChatGPT is what's known as a generative AI. It generates text responses based on user queries and simulates human conversations and language. And a lot of this comes from the training data that was used to train the model. It was used websites, books, journals, articles, all sorts of things were fed into this large language model and produced what's known as natural language processing. So some people might say, well, AI is going to be the death of teaching. And while sometimes you might not know whether a student is cheating or not, some things are a little bit more obvious. So this is the first paragraph of a paper titled The 12th Night, and it reads, the first paragraph reads, "I'm sorry, but as an AI language model, I'm not able to complete this assignment. However, I can provide you with some guidance on how to approach this essay." The instructor's note reads, ChatGPT, rewrite the assignment in your own words. Now, why is AI important and why do we want to embrace it? There was an MIT study that basically said that having AI with you, or ChatGPT, is essentially like having an expert in any field with you at all times. It basically produces much better quality work in half the time. It's a lot faster than trying to come up with some of the things on your own. So ChatGPT as an educational tool. So one of the things that we can do is we can streamline our communication. So this is an example of, we asked ChatGPT to write an email telling students that campus will be closed for Thanksgiving, but reminding them that it's a great time to start on their research project. Now, what this has produced is very clearly a first draft attempt, but it gets all of the information across. They have places where you can enter the dates, you can enter your name, your title, your contact information. And while this doesn't have the same voice as you would have, it takes a matter of, a couple of minutes to produce this versus, staring at a blank email, especially for me late at night. ChatGPT can do coding. So here's an example of asking ChatGPT to change the color of a cursor in WordPress. So not only does this generate the code needed for the CSS in this case, it also tells you how to access the website, tells you how to go through WordPress, how to edit the customizer, and how to change that. We can use it as a study tool. This is an example of 10 questions that are commonly found on MBA entrance exams. So what is the primary purpose of a SWOT analysis? Define ROI and break-even points. This is a great way of getting a bunch of questions to enable studying. And this works really well in group work as well. Now, I only used 10 questions as an example, but I like to make videos in my free time, and I had at one point asked ChatGPT to generate about 100 different ideas for videos just related to keyboards and VPNs and stuff. And it took a matter of 10 minutes. And those were much better ideas than if I were to try to come up with anything. So I like ChatGPT for that. Here's another example for questions that I might find on a nursing school exam. What is the primary role of a nurse in the assessment phase of the nursing process? All sorts of things that I know nothing about, so I'm going to stop talking about that. But the idea is that we can prompt it to ask very specific questions about a very specific process, and it will help train us on how to do something and how to address that. Writing prompts. So this is one of my favorite examples. Can you give me 3 ideas for short stories about Halloween? And so this is a fun activity to do in class. You can have your students pick one of these ideas and then create a story about it, a short story, or use this as a longer semester long process where they can pick one of those ideas and kind of run from there. Placeholder text, we might know this as the lorem ipsum of the world, but with how easy ChatGPT and AI in general is becoming to use, we might see that you don't have to use lorem ipsum anymore. Our placeholder text can now be the actual text that we need, with a little bit of fine tuning, that is. We can, of course, generate images as well. So in this marketing idea, we had a slogan for a popcorn store. This was 10 slogans for a popcorn store. Some of them are really good. Well, some of them are not very good. But that is the joy of going through and finding all these little nuggets in ChatGPT and AI in general. Here's another 10. I like this one. Taste the crunchy goodness of gourmet popcorn. That's perfect. Okay, so to wrap it up, I'm going to talk to you about a couple of trends that we've seen in AI. The first one is personal or small scale large language models, which that's a mouthful. But the idea is that we can have AI that is dedicated to our business, to our industry, or to our institution. And so if you have questions that you can ask that AI about your institution, it can more effectively answer the questions or generate ideas for you. We also have, and this is probably been the last couple of weeks, is this idea of AI poisoning, where because AI is able to generate content, specifically images, we can actually influence the training in a negative way, and thus the results that the AI produces is poorer and poorer as time goes on. So I'm interested to see where AI is going, specifically because of this poisoning. We also have another thing called Edge AI, and that's AI that lives on smartphones and IoT devices. So this would be essentially your Google smart homes, your cell phones, and even now when we have earbuds that have Alexa connected to it, we're going to see that more and more on devices that we're going to carry with us. And then AI governance and regulation. We've seen really the power of AI transform things. And because of this, we have to have regulation in place that prevents AI work from being copywritten. We don't particularly want people to influence the market by producing so much work and such work of medium quality that it completely breaks the industries. We've seen a lot of this with, there's a person that I saw on TikTok that since August of last year has written over 100 full-length novels using ChatGPT, which to me is an abomination of the market, but we all get to enjoy those books. So anyway, some food for thought. A lot of what we do in class is related to how we approach our students and how we approach our own content. And so if we think about the activities that we can do, sometimes we have to have, some other idea influencers talk with us. How could you use assignments to prepare your students to engage with AI in their future careers? This is going to be a big one. There's more and more AI going to be in the future. We're going to have them on more devices. We're going to have them in our cars. Elon Musk is already talking about incorporating his AI into his robot. I think it's called Optimus. And then in his Tesla vehicles as well. And then what are some of your fears or concerns about implementing these technologies and activities in terms of preparing your students? Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Tianus. Appreciate that. Every time you present, I learn something new, so thank you. All right, our next speaker on the panel is Dr. Chloe Shin, who is at the University of Houston, and she's an assistant professor there. So I'm going to turn it over to her.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I am Chloe Shin, an assistant professor at the University of Houston. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. And today I'll be sharing my experiences with using ChatGPT for teaching, specifically using it as my teaching assistant. First, let me tell you a little bit about my background because it has shaped my ChatGPT usage. I did my doctorate in textile technology and management, and my studies focused on understanding consumer psychology and behavior, particularly within the retail fashion industry. And at the University of Houston, I'm currently teaching these two classes. The undergraduate course is on data visualization, where students learn the fundamental design principles of data visualization and gain hands-on experience with software like Excel and Tableau. The graduate course is not assessment and evaluation in the context of human resource development. The primary objective is to equip students with the skills and knowledge necessary to evaluate the effectiveness of a training program at an organization. And this class covers various evaluation models and methods. So as you can see, my teaching subjects don't perfectly align with my area of expertise, which is quite common in academia. And you'll see that this situation has shaped the way I use ChatGPT in my teaching. So my goal today is to share different ways I use ChatGPT to increase efficiency in teaching and provide a few tips for using ChatGPT effectively. And here are my top 5 ways to use the software. I use it to generate low stakes assessment like syllabus quiz, to draft assignment instruction and rubrics, and generate content for my lectures. I also use it as a self-teaching tool, as data visualization and human resource development are rather outside my expertise. I turn to ChatGPT. It helps me grasp foundational concepts and delve deeper into these subjects efficiently. Lastly, I use it for grading, particularly in the feedback process. It aids in refining my comments and saving quite a lot of time in the grading process. So first, let me show you the ChatGPT interface, which is quite simple, as you can see. So on the left side, what you're seeing is a sidebar where you can create and manage chat rooms. And you see that I have a multiple. And this is a chat box where you can type your questions in prompts. So regardless of the goal, the steps I take to get to a desired end product is the same. I start by providing a detailed prompt, which includes relevant context or information. This guides ChatGPT to align closely with your desired outcome. You may not get what you want at the first try. In this case, iterating on the initial result ensures that the output is refined and aligns better with your needs. So for example, when crafting a rubric for a project, I might begin with something like, can you create a rubric for this project that's worth 30 points? Include a criterion for participation in peers presentations. And here are the instructions for the project and insert project instructions. And if further refinement is needed, I would just follow up with something like, can you include an additional criterion for the time limit? The time limit is 30 minutes. And this two-step process ensures I achieve the desired outcome with precision and relevance. So now I'll be sharing concrete examples to illustrate each, starting with creating a low-stake assessments. So this is for my undergraduate class on data visualization. I wanted to include a question about late submission policy. So what I did was feed the course policy with the following prompt: create a multiple choice question about the late submission policy, which retrieved this, a complete question. And I was very happy with it. So I just adapted it as is. And another thing I wanted to do was manage student expectations surrounding the course delivery format, which was online asynchronous format. So I used this very simple prompt: create a multiple choice question about an asynchronous class. And the result was this complete question asking what best describes asynchronous instruction. And I was also very happy with it, so I adopted this version. So let's move on to creating assignment instructions and rubrics. So this is for my graduate class. So for this class, as the final project, students identify a training program that actually exists and then propose a evaluation plan. And there are two components. They do a written report and oral presentation. So initially, oral presentation was just kind of recreating, replicating the written report, and I wanted to make it a little bit more engaging. So what I decided to do is make it into a more of a collaborative problem-solving presentation where students present a potential problem they might face in implementing the plan that they propose and facilitate a brainstorming discussion to collaboratively identify potential solutions. So I wanted ChatGPT to create full instructions for this new assignment. So to do that, I use this prompt. The first half is basically asking ChatGPT to create instructions for this new assignment. And the second part of this prompt gives the context of the original written assignment, which is identifying a program at workplace and design an evaluation plan. I did have to do a little bit of iterations, and after a few iterations, I got this result complete with objectives and the presentation outline, which I was very happy with and adopted as is. And now that we have instruction, what do we need? We need a rubric, right? So I gave this follow-up prompt asking ChatGPT to create a rubric for this project that's worth 30 points. And I said, include a criterion for participation in peers presentation. I included this in the prompt because I thought this is maybe not the most common evaluation criterion for presentation. Maybe, but I thought that may be the case. And I don't recall exactly how many iterations I had to do, but in the end, I got what I needed exactly, and I used this as is. Now let's move on to creating lecture material. So this is again for my graduate class, and the topic was identifying stakeholders when developing the evaluation plan. And I wanted to illustrate this idea that while there are generally accepted definitions for different categories of stakeholders like primary, secondary, and tertiary, the individuals or groups that fit into each category might differ depending on various factors like the size of the organization. So what I did was use this prompt. The first part basically providing the contact information, which I just shared with you. So in light of this idea regarding stakeholders, I followed up with an instruction to create a contrasting concrete example in the context of evaluating a leadership development program for a for-profit organization. And this is the actual lecture slide that I use for my class. And I developed this table based on what I got from ChatGPT. So in response to this prompt, ChatGPT gave me two examples, contrasting startup versus large corporations in the same context of evaluating a learning program for for-profit organization. As you can see in this table, for different types of stakeholder group, even though it's the same stakeholder type group, the actual individuals that belong to each group differ very much depending on the size of the company. So I was able to successfully illustrate this point using this concrete example. All right, so I'm gonna now move on to self-teaching on the subject matter for teaching. So as I said before, I also need to self-teach on the human resource development, as it's almost completely outside of my discipline. But initially, I read a lot of primary text to familiarize myself with the content, but I use ChatGPT as kind of a refresher course. So there are a lot of key concepts that I have to remind myself before class. So what I typically do is before class, I would review my lecture slides. And then if I see that I need some refresher course, I would quickly use ChatGPT to give me a summary of that key concept. So for example, I wanted to refresher on different types of evaluation, from summative, formative, developmental, and needs assessment. So I asked ChatGPT to compare and contrast in terms of definition, purpose, and evaluation methods. And I got this very clean summary of each type of assessment and evaluation in terms of definition, purpose, evaluation methods, exactly how I wanted it to be. All right, so now I'm gonna move on to grading. So grading, this is about my undergraduate class again. So give you a little bit of background. For this class, there are a lot of assignments. So almost every week I have between 50 to 100 grading items. Currently, I do have a teaching assistant, but she's a master's student who's also not too familiar with the content area. So I do ask my teaching assistant to do the initial grading, giving feedback on the assignment, but I always have to revise the feedback. So to illustrate, one of the assignment is to have the students look at the actual sales data from the University of Houston's bookstore. And I asked students to kind of review the data set, and then from the perspective of the bookstore manager, develop a possible question that the manager might want to answer with this data set. And I also asked my students to explain the question's importance and relevance to the bookstore manager. So I primarily use ChatGPT to refine the comments. So for example, I would use this prompt where I give the context, saying you are giving feedback as an instructor on student work in a course about data visualization. And I would kind of give specific instruction on how to revise my teaching assistant feedback. So for example, I say revise the following to highlight that while it's a good question to ask, it's too broad and fails to make an explicit connection to the sales data set. That's followed by my teaching assistant's feedback. So you might think that, oh, why don't you just revise GA's feedback? And which I have done it before, but based on my experience, leveraging ChatGPT is a little bit more efficient, particularly given the number of grading items that I have. Okay, now I want to wrap up my presentation with 2 tips. First is that I highly recommend that you always double check and approach ChatGPT's response with a critical eye. You might have heard about what's called ChatGPT's tendency to hallucinate. And what that means is that ChatGPT tends to give you inaccurate or completely made up information. So some of the concrete examples is you might ask for certain references on certain topic. It might give you references, but they may not exist at all. So it's important that you exercise a critical eye and be mindful of this ChatGPT's tendency to hallucinate. And my second tip is to set up this ChatGPT rooms centered on a specific goals. The reason is that in each this room that I set up, you see that I have a multiple. AI learning happens within this chat room as well. So if you dedicate one room, for example, specifically to self-teaching on the HRD content, it can eliminate the need to provide detailed prompts and background information. So here is an example. So the first prompt, I use ChatGPT to remind myself of a different evaluation models. And one of the models is called Phillips ROI framework. So I say, initially, can you give me a summary of this model, including its origin, blah, 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 and comparison to the Kirkpatrick model, which is the foundational model that informed the subsequent evaluation models. But after a while, I only need to say, give me a summary of another evaluation model, which is the balanced scorecard. Even though I didn't specifically tell ChatGPT to give me a summary in terms of the origin and all these things that I listed in my first prompt, it will give you a summary that includes all of these factors. So it's very nifty to have a dedicated chat room. Okay, so with that note, I'm going to end my presentation. I really hope that you see the utility of ChatGPT for teaching and are inspired to give it a try yourself. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. That was great to see the actual interface and what it looks like. I really appreciated that. That was really good. All right. So next we have Dr. Melanie Schmidt, and she is an assistant professor at Texas Tech University, and she's going to be talking to us also about how she incorporates AI into her classroom as well. All right. So Melanie, I'll turn it over to you. Melanie, you're muted. Sorry, you're muted.
Sorry. Like everybody else has talked about, I'm going to talk a little bit about AI in the classroom. And this is something that I got interested in this summer. I started attending some workshops and things like that about AI and ways to incorporate it, and found that there really are some beneficial ways to do this in the classroom. So the main source that I have been using for my information is called AI for Educators, and it's by Matt Miller. So he actually has a website called Ditch That Textbook, and he does a lot of ed tech newsletters, things like that. But he offered an AI course that I took this summer, and it really changed my opinion on how AI can be used in the classroom for beneficial purposes. Because I feel like a lot of times people have a negative connotation of AI and they're kind of scared of it. But he really kind of opened up my eyes about some ways that we can use it. So here are 6 conversations that he had in his book that schools should be having about AI, because it's not going away. We're going to have to embrace using AI, but we have to show our students how to use it responsibly. But what is it? What can or can't it do? How will teaching and learning change as AI expands? We can't even do assignments like we used to, because they're not going to be able to help those students with their future careers. So we've got to change the way that we have our classroom teaching and learning. What does responsible AI use look like? What does irresponsible use look like? How can it save us time? That is the one thing that people struggle with, but we all have the same amount of, is time. It's that some people are able to manage that time better than others, and AI can really save a lot of time for teachers. What should we be concerned about? And what does the future look like for our students? We have to not just think about how we've always done things or doing things in the present. We have to think about the future and setting our students up for success. So this is something that I wanted to share because a lot of people have the notion that using AI is cheating, especially with a lot of the paper writing and things like that. So this is a kind of a guide that Matt Miller had come up with. And it's kind of interesting to think about it because it makes you think, well, where do you draw that line? What's okay? What's not okay? Obviously at the top is all AI work. So the student has the AI do all of the work for them, no thought by the student. But we have to think about, are there some deeper issues at play? Are they able to do the work? Do they feel confident enough to start the work? Are they one of those students that sits there at a blank screen and just doesn't know how to start? So that's something to think about. The next one, AI writes content, but student edits it based on learning from class. So again, it's more AI creation, but they're having to use some skills in order to make sure that the writing is correct. Next one, the student rewrites AI generated content with own improvement ideas. Again, they're using AI generated content, but they have to develop their own writing voice for this step. So they're putting more of themselves into that assignment. AI generates multiple drafts. Student chooses best parts of AI drafts. That's the beauty of AI, is that you can keep regenerating different drafts of things, and you can make it your own, combine a lot of different aspects of the different drafts. And so that's another way to use it. Student writes bullet points to include, but AI writes the draft. So this is kind of like if you're trying to create a presentation, things like the examples that were given earlier. If you had those bullet points, then it could give you kind of guidance or an outline on different things to include in your paper. The next one, AI guides student through writing process as a writing coach. I mean, it should be used as a tool or as an assistant, and this can really do that. You can give it prompts to make it give you feedback like she talked about before, and that's very helpful. That way, by the time you do turn in that final draft, that it is a polished version. Student creates content until stuck, and then ask AI for help to get unstuck. And being stuck is, defined differently by different people. But again, sometimes we have writer's block. Sometimes we just can't get started on on something. So it can help you kind of start generating and brainstorming. Next one, student writes a draft, AI writes a draft, and student adds best AI ideas. I think this is another good one to use because the student is actually thinking about what they're wanting to write first, but then they're having AI do it and they're comparing those different options. Student gathers stats or research via AI, but creates all content on own. Again, this is a great tool for brainstorming, for gathering data. It's deeper than just Google searching something. So it can help them get a lot of that content they need, as long as they know that it's correct and accurate, because like she said, it could be that their resources are being made up. So you have to teach students how to disseminate that as well. Student consults internet and AI for writing ideas, but creates content on their own. Again, if a student has trouble just brainstorming ideas, it's a very helpful tool. Student writes all content, but asks AI for feedback to improve. I think this one, really, we should all be using if we're giving students writing assignments, because I actually had my students do like a history paper over the history of the profession. And I told them that they could use AI, but they had to make sure they cited it. And one of the things that I did was, when they had their assignment completed, I took their text and I told ChatGPT to read this over, to look at content accuracy and API format or APA formatting. And that gave some additional feedback. I'd already given my own feedback, but that gave some additional feedback. So I think that that's another benefit. And then student does all the work without any assistance from AI, which in some cases that's okay. But again, I mean, when they get into the career field, they're going to be using some form of AI in their careers. So we've got to show them how to use it responsibly. Okay, so ChatGPT has been talked about, but it lets you interact with it in a conversational way, and you basically give it prompts or questions, and it's going to draw from a large database. So here's just how much it grew when it first came out. It amassed more than 1 million users in 5 days and 100 million active monthly users in 2 months. And to put that into perspective, it took Instagram 2 months to reach 1 million. And sorry, there's a typo there. Spotify took 5 months. So it is a very fast growing tool. So here are some other ways that we can use ChatGPT in the classroom. Again, we can use it as a deeper source of information than Google. It's not just giving us a list of websites, it's actually presenting information in a conversational tone. We can use it for a lot of good examples. You know, when you think of musicians or artists, a lot of times they look at other musicians and artists that they admire for examples and inspiration for work. We can do the same with AI. If we have some good examples to show our students, they can use those examples to hopefully format their own good work. We can use it to remix their student work. So this is where you can do some fun things. You could have them put their work in and change it into a poem or, you know, a song, or have it be given in a specific tone or from a specific character or historical figure. Have students grade the AI. So this is showing them how to know what to expect on your assignment. So actually give them the rubric that you're going to use to grade their assignment, and have them grade an AI generated assignment and see how they score it. Have them debate the AI. There's all kinds of debatable topics that I used to do with my students, especially like in parenting, child development. Things like breastfeeding versus bottle feeding, cloth diapers versus disposable. You could have the students select one side of that debate and then have the AI argue in the other side for that whole class conversation. Use it for insight into big, difficult to solve problems. I mean, this is using critical science. What would AI think about ways to help with food shortages or different big issues in the world? Just having another perspective, I think, can start a big conversation. Use it for advice. The first time that I was really intrigued by AI was when we were using it with an early childhood education app, and the developers, they told us to give them like a common childhood problem, and I think we put something about kids that have adverse childhood experiences, like how do you deal with them? And all of a sudden this AI starts developing this plan of what can you do to support these kids, and it had it just very detailed. I was like, well, that's amazing. And so that's when I started diving into more using the AI for classroom use. You can take several responses and make a better product. That's kind of like we talked about before. You can regenerate, the answers, and it's going to be different every time, and take a combination of those things. Use it to create leveled text sets. This is important, especially if you have students on different learning levels, different languages, different reading levels. You can actually prompt the ChatGPT to give you information on a certain level. Like if you're having trouble explaining a complex concept, one of the things that Matt Miller was talking about, he wanted a definition of AI, but he told it to give that definition as if you're talking to a small child. And so it can give simplified explanations of complex topics. Ask it for definitions on a variety of levels. Again, that's kind of the same thing. You can make it as complex or as simple as you want it. Ask it for student work feedback. And she talked about that before, but I also use that as a tool in my class. and use it to create review content, questions, and activities. We actually did this one of the first classes this semester. Students were given an index card with a certain term that we were going to go over, dealing with FCS history. So I told them to go ahead and look up information on that. And then we were going to create a GIM kit, which is a vocabulary review application. We were going to collaborate and create one of those. But for that, you have to have multiple choice questions. And how hard is it for students to come up with multiple choice questions on their own? Because a lot of times they're going to want to put like all of the above or none of the above or some of those types of answers. So they actually took the content that they had found on their topic and they inputted it into ChatGPT, and I had them prompt it to make like 5 multiple choice questions over this information. And so they picked the best one and they inputted that into our GIM kit. And then we were able to do that review together. So there are a lot of different ways that you can incorporate it in the classroom. Some of the things that you need to do though, of course, you need to be specific. You need to prep your machine, your ChatGPT or whatever device you're using. So introduce your question with a prompt for P. Give it a role. You want to be as specific as possible. Be explicit in your instructions. The more specific you are, probably the better your results are going to be. And you're not going to have to keep regenerating different things. And then set parameters of the answer. Be very specific in what you're asking for. And then lastly, here are some life skills that we need to be teaching in order to interact with AI. First of all, yes, it could, a student could give it a prompt and it could give them the entire answer and they could copy and paste that. But we need to show them responsible ways to use it. So we need to teach them how to ask a good question, how to ask or give it a good prompt. So ask clear and specific questions. And of course, the more precise, the more likely you're going to get accurate information. Another good thing about ChatGPT is you can keep asking those follow-up questions so it can drill down into more specific information that you're looking for. And then the last one is critical thinking. It's not human. We still have to think. It's not going to take away the thinking process from us. I think it just can make our conversations and our discussions deeper. So responses may not always be accurate or appropriate. So they have to be able to look at that information that they're getting from that prompt that they asked. And they have to be able to know how to tell, is it accurate? Is it relevant? Is it appropriate? Another thing with ChatGPT is that sometimes there are biases in the answers that it gives you. So you have to look for that too. I think one example that Matt Miller had given is that they were asking about maybe doctors and nurses, and they found that every time they were talking about scenarios that a doctor would be a male and a nurse would be a female. So there are some of those biases that are in there, and you need to teach your students how to look for those things because that can happen still. And then also looking for the accuracy of what answers they're getting. Okay, so I've given my resources. There's another guy named Dan Fitzpatrick who is from Britain, and he's another one that does a lot of ed tech type of work. So he's got a lot of good resources as well. And then Matt Miller, his book AI for Educators is excellent, and he has a course as well that you can take. But he has the website Ditch That Textbook, and you can sign up for like weekly newsletters for AI and for ed tech. So here's my contact information if you have any questions or need anything. Like I said, I just really started diving into this summer, but it's fascinating to me, and I keep taking more professional development on it and keep taking more classes. So I'm excited about continuing to implement it in the classroom.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I appreciated you sharing the sources too. That's nice to have as well, to have some go-tos. I'm going to put Matt Miller's book in my Amazon cart here in a minute, because I mean, it's just nice to have some resources to look at. So we do have about 10 minutes left for a Q&A, and all 3 of our panelists are here. So if you have questions for any of them, you can hop on and ask, or you can put it in the chat and I can read it for you.
Just want to thank all of the panelists. The presentations were excellent. Just a question, I guess, to all three of you guys. If you are, in the very infancy of your entrance of AI in your classroom or your other work, where would you start? Or how do you start? I guess that's my question.
I would say create an account. I know it's like no-brainer, yeah, of course, but really, I think once you have your account, just kind of try play with it. I think that would be my recommendation.
I agree with that. I think getting started, just using the website, and there's two versions. There's 3.5 and 4. If you don't want to pay for 4, then 3.5 does well. Start with asking it things that you would want to know. So say, for example, you want to like generate a new idea for an assignment. Start with that. See how you would do the assignment versus how it would do it. And then there are great YouTube videos about people who are using ChatGPT and different types of AI. I know that I talk primarily about ChatGPT, and I think we all do, but there are hundreds of websites and applications that do AI in different ways. There are music generation, video generation, image, text, all sorts of things. So get started. Read some books. There are great books like Melanie mentioned about ChatGPT, and there are several websites as well that have good information on it as well.
Like they said, I think just experimenting with it. And I forgot to mention one way that I use it. And this would be something that's good to start off a semester with a class. But a lot of students are familiar with Quizlet, and Quizlet now has a tool to where you can feed it notes, class notes, things like that, and it will create like a study guide for the student. So it will give them like an outline of the information. It'll make flashcards for them. It'll give them sample questions. So those students that are just getting into college or undergrad that are having trouble with study skills, being able to translate those notes into something that they can review, I think is very helpful.
We had one. Oh, go ahead, Jay. You go.
Melanie, I was wondering what class that you use. What's the name of the course?
Okay, I teach mainly undergrad, so I actually teach an intro to family and consumer sciences education course. And then the main one that we've used AI in is it's a junior level class, and it's foundations of family and consumer sciences education. So these are pre-educators. So I'm trying to give them tools that they could use in their own classrooms once they get into that classroom.
We had a request in the chat from someone, if you could share your slides. Would you all be willing, that all the presenters, to share your slide decks with me, and then I can send them out to the people who registered tonight and attended? Would you be willing to do that? Okay, great. So we'll do that, Gina. Yeah. All right. And then Dawn, I see you have your hand up.
Hi, thank you. First of all, family and consumer sciences educator here, so appreciate that there's another one on here with me. My question is, I am starting to do some research, and I'm wondering if you have used AI to generate your research questions. I have not done research in the way of like PhD stuff for over a decade. And I'm going to Finland to do some research. And so I'm struggling to like generate those questions and get started on that. So I'm wondering if anybody has used AI to do that or has any advice for me. Thanks.
I have not used it for that purpose, but I know that TTU had a really good webinar series on using it for research. I don't know if we could share access with that, but I could get your email address and try to share if that's possible.
Although I also don't have that experience of using ChatGPT technology-based software to formulate research questions. I have experimented with a couple of that AI-based software specializing in research, but thus far, it could be just me or the way I use the software, but it's been more of a disappointment for me. For example, I use some software to aid in kind of, I guess, more targeted Google search to find maybe some statistics or other data that could be used in kind of the introduction of my manuscript. I mean, it did give me the sources of the data that they retrieved, but I would say my own Googling gave better results. So I also plan on experimenting with other research focused software. It'd be great if anyone come across a useful one and share it. I appreciate it.
So I mentioned earlier that I use ChatGPT to generate ideas for videos. If you'll give me a second, I can pull up Notion and I will demonstrate what I meant with that. So I have just an interest in making videos, and so I can't find it. Sorry, give me a minute. Of course, I don't have it open. So what I did was I basically asked for ChatGPT to generate an amount of questions based on a certain topic. You can also do the same thing with questions that have not been answered specifically in that area, and that might at least give you some interesting ideas to work off of as well. If I can find examples, I will send them to you. I saw that you added your email.
Well, while you look for that, I had a question. Chloe, you were talking about that you use it, to write test questions or things or a rubric. Do you give any sort of credit, or are there any rules on that? Because I know, like, say if I Google a rubric for a written paper, like you can find those through a lot of like writing centers like the OWL or other writing centers, and then always at the bottom there's copyrights for that. Are there any sort of rules on like who owns it if GTP is who's generating it, or do you claim it as your own, or how is that understood?
I feel like I'm not an expert on kind of regulations or framework that might determine how you would kind of cite work generated by ChatGPT. But personally, I have not disclosed that those instructions and rubrics were generated by ChatGPT. But my thought is that it's likely, given how there are a lot of authorities trying to come up with regulations, frameworks for regulation, maybe we will someday have a kind of agreed upon ways to cite work generated by ChatGPT.
I think there are rules for citations too, so there are ways to cite your use of it. I think it just depends on the level of how much you use the AI. But I have my students, if they use it, they have to do a citation for it.
Interesting. Thank you all.
Melody, what does that citation look like? Is it just ChatGPT?
Yeah, I think they actually put like Open AI because that's the one that has ChatGPT, and then the date. If I can remember right. Again, that was another one that they had talked about on that research webinar for Texas Tech. So yeah, it's interesting that they can they need to give credit if they've used a lot of the AI for their assignment. And there is a way to do that.
All right. Well, oh, Gina, go ahead. We have time for one more.
I think the Wall Street Journal has a way of referencing and citing ChatGPT or AI sources. They did a webinar about that like 2 months ago. So you can probably find it in the Wall Street Journal website.
Interesting. And it, I mean, obviously from all the presentations tonight, it is definitely an evolving field. And so, you know, we're learning kind of as we go. It is 7:01. So I wanted to wrap up just by thanking all of our presenters so much for being here tonight and for sharing how you're using this new technology and explaining it. And this was really informative and a great use of how that we can incorporate the technology into our own work and class lives. So I really appreciate you taking the time to be here this evening. Thank you to everyone in